Welcome to the Old Man and the Three Things with JJ Redick and Tim Legler. We apologize for not being with you last week. Unfortunately, I had called a game in Miami, Tim. You know this, but I'd called a game in Miami and had a flight early in the morning, was supposed to get back in time to record in time to get it out on Monday, and basically got stuck on a tube on the tarmac for about 4 hours and got in from back to New York super late and didn't have a chance to record. So haven't talked to you in a while. There's a ton of stuff right now going on, Tim, with the NBA. I actually put in place a 50-game embargo on MVP talk. I know I discussed it one time with the Dunker Spot guys. We have passed the 50-game mark. I want to get your thoughts right now on where you're at with the MVP race.
Oh my goodness. So you want it specific? See, here's where I'm at right now. I can honestly say I have never probably been more spread out in where my vote could go at this time of the year heading into All-Star weekend than I've ever been. And that's without question. And that really is primarily because of what happened with Joel Embiid. Right? Joel Embiid's injury changed everything because, he clearly was the front runner. Then he went down for a little bit, and people were wondering had Jokic closed the gap? Was at this point Milwaukee hadn't gone on there a little bit of a tailspin? Was Giannis right there? We talked about some of the younger guys like Shea and even Anthony Edwards was got a little bit of talk. Brunson, and then Embiid goes down. So now you're like, well, where are we with this? So right now, as we sit here today, I think Jokic probably is still in control of the award, but I think that it's as close as you're going to get at this time of the year. I think you can make a great argument for Kawhi Leonard, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Giannis. I think Luka. I don't know that. And then I would probably say like Brunson, Anthony Edwards. I mean, at this point, if the Cleveland Cavaliers keep doing what they're doing, and they just keep winning like the rest of the way, and they like really close the gap, and they say they finish 2, but they're right behind Boston, and they win 55, 57 games, Donovan Mitchell's going to have to get some consideration. So you'd have to put him in the conversation too. But as we sit here right now, I'd probably still lean toward Jokic. How about you?
I'm Jokic and Shea. 1 and 2, 2 and 1, however you want to do it. Again, we still have 30 games to play. I'm not going to rank my MVP status right now. I think there's a big difference between saying this person is my MVP so far, which I'm truthfully I'm not there yet with anyone.
Yeah.
Prior to Embiid getting hurt, I felt like, and again we were on that 50-game embargo, I felt like Embiid was the MVP. Now he goes down, changes the whole dynamic, as you said. So I'm a fan right now of just acknowledging the players that are in the conversation. And I'm glad you brought up Kawhi because I certainly think he's in the conversation. We're going to get to him and the Clippers in a second. I'm glad you brought up Donovan Mitchell. If you watched the first game with PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford, holy shit, did the Mavs look good? Just absolutely blowing out the Oklahoma City Thunder. Luka's playing unbelievable. He's certainly in the conversation. You mentioned Brunson. You mentioned Mitchell. Giannis, of course. Tim, the best indicator historically of the MVP, the stat that correlates the most with that is win shares per 48. This is a stat you can easily find on Basketball Reference. And just real quick, I want to go through this. The leaders in win shares per 48. Jokic is 1, Shea is 2, Embiid is 3. He's out of the running now. Giannis is 4, Jarrett Allen is 5, and then a few of the guys we mentioned here: Luka at 8, Kawhi at 10, Sabonis at 12. He's top 5 actually in just total win shares. Brunson down at 17. You go to win shares, Shea is 1, Jokic is 2. Then there's a big drop off. Giannis is 3, Sabonis 4, Luka 5, Brunson 8, Kawhi 9, Mitchell 17, Jarrett Allen 12. Jarrett Allen, by the way, in that stretch where they're 13 and 12, he has played unreal. We'll get to him in a second, but I want to talk about Kawhi Leonard right now. I called their game in Miami last Sunday, and Dave Pasch brought up on the broadcast, like, with the way the Clippers are playing, the way Kawhi is playing, he's got to be in the MVP conversation. I said he certainly is. And I probably at the time would have him fourth. Now we've closed the game and Embiid's injury got announced. So then it was like, all right, well, now I have him third. Like he's still to me a little bit behind Shea and Jokic. Yeah. And it's not because of how the team's playing. It's not a knock on Kawhi. I'm not Kawhi hating. I think there is a slight difference in the individual burden that Shea and Jokic have on that team. And the teams are right there in the standings. So again, a lot of this will be separated to me in some degree because I do factor in with MVP specifically. It's like performance relative to expectations and where your team is at in the standings. But right now, Kawhi Leonard is playing at an MVP level, and I would put him in my top three. Now, I'm not going to rank Jokic, Shea, and Kawhi, but Kawhi is in my top three right now, and I have a slight edge for Shea and Jokic ahead of him.
I love the way you described all of that. Listen, it's such a subjective thing, and there's a lot of different ways to look at it and what carries the most weight for you as a voter. Like that's ultimately what it comes down to. It's a very individualized thing. But some of the things are going to play into this. And just list the names that we're going over right here. You wonder, to what extent do you say, look at the burden he has relative to who they're playing with and how much support and help do these guys have with other guys that can be the primary engine on a given night? If you sort of define it by that, you got to put Shea right there near the top. I mean, he's got to be neck and neck with just what he has to generate for that team offensively. Look, Jalen Williams, Chet, they've been great. They've got great chemistry on that team. The way they share it is great. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is the guy that's got the ultimate hammer. Like, he can get something good for himself anytime he wants. And if they didn't have that element to their offense and he didn't have that to his game, just imagine where Oklahoma City would be. Like, how many less wins would they have if Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was 15% less than what he is as a player? So you look at what he has to do every night to drive that. That should carry a lot of weight. I feel the same way about Jalen Brunson. And I don't know how high Jalen Brunson's going to finish, but I look at that. So that brings me to a guy like Kawhi. As great as he is, as consistent as he is, and look, this is like a return to the Kawhi Leonard that we saw win a championship, which is, I don't know that anybody expected this kind of sustained run of availability. But that's what I think has been the most impressive thing about Kawhi, because his game, when he has played throughout the last 4 or 5 years, it's been kind of spotty in and out. It kind of looks like this, but then it would disappear for a while. So you always put it on the back burner. You always expected there to be another stretch where he's just not going to be available. Has not been the case this year. And he's reminded everybody about the consistent greatness that he brings every single night. I do wonder, you look at, they've got Paul George, they added James Harden, they've got Westbrook on that team. Does that hurt Kawhi in any way relative to some of these other guys? Like even Jokic, his burden is so much higher, I think, for what Denver has to have out of him than even what they have to get out of Kawhi every night to win. So I just wonder, how do you view that when you're looking at it by the end of the year? When you're looking at that, how much weight do you put on that? And look, obviously, along with that is, well, where are they in the standings? Like, how close are they to the top? Because you're not going to reward a guy for all this burden he's carrying if his team is 10 games back. That then you're taken out of it. But if you're there and you're within a few games, or you finish in the top 2, top 3, and it's tight in either conference, and you have more of a burden on your plate, I think that should carry weight. I don't know that it will.
Yeah. I said it on the broadcast. I wasn't speaking directly about myself. I was speaking about voters. And I think that mindset is a mindset that a lot of voters have, and it could potentially hurt Kawhi Leonard. Whether it's real or not, the perception is, well, he also has Paul George. He also has James Harden, where with Shea and Jokic, they don't have that. Like Jamal Murray's never made an all-star team. Jamal Murray's never made an all-NBA game, all-NBA team. That's not to say he's not an all-star level, all-NBA level player. He's literally got the highest points per game increase from the regular season to the playoffs of any player in NBA history. Jamal Murray's a real motherfucker. He is a motherfucker. And like, you have to factor that in. Shea, I think your point about Shea is real. I also would say in the case of those two teams rather than this like top tier star talent at the top of their teams, they have those two guys in Shea and Jokic, and then they have just basically a perfectly constructed starting five and rotation, right? You think about OKC with Dort and Holmgren and Jalen Williams and Josh Giddey, Isaiah Joe coming off the bench, the starting five of the Nuggets, which I've talked about all the time. Those pieces, they just complement each other perfectly. And still, Jokic and Shea have this burden. Kawhi, as it relates to Kawhi and the Clippers, since December 1st, the Clippers have the best record in the NBA, 27-6. Cleveland right behind them in second place. Since December 1st, Boston in third place. In those 33 games they've played, they're 27-6. In those 33 games, Kawhi has played in 29. The Clippers are 25-4 in those 29 games he's played. He's at 26 a game, 6 rebounds, 4 assists, 2.7 stocks, 56% from the field, 49.7% from three at 5 attempts a game. I'm calling that Miami game last Sunday. And look, it reminded me of the San Antonio Spurs version of Kawhi Leonard. And if you remember, there was an entire season where it didn't matter who he was guarding. He could be guarding the primary guy, and teams would be like, go stand in the corner. During that Miami broadcast, I said, you can't put the ball near him. He's going to take it. He's so disruptive right now as a defender. There was a play where he's guarding Jimmy Butler. Jimmy gets towards the middle. He pokes it from behind, goes out, gets an outlet pass, easy dunk, right? He's the three-point shooting. It's like automatic. Catch and shoot, automatic, line drive, perfect rotation, net doesn't move. His ability to post and score in isolation, like he is so efficient. And it's like, it's hard to say like, well, this is the best version of Kawhi because we've seen the best version of Kawhi so many times. We haven't seen the best version of Kawhi for this long of a sustained stretch since probably the Raptors. I'd have to go back and look at the 2021 and the 2020 season, but certainly since the 2021 injury against the Utah Jazz, this is the longest we've seen, the most availability. Just he's playing unbelievable. And I think in some ways, in the same way that you have to factor this in with Shea, and Jokic gets poorly sort of knocked for his defense, but the numbers say otherwise. You have to factor in with Kawhi, I think, his level of two-way brilliance.
Listen, you brought up the play. I know the play you're referencing, the poke away and the run out. The game before that, he had a play. It was one of the most impossible help and recover plays I've ever seen a guy make, where he is basically on the left wing, ball's being driven sort of from the right, from the slot on the opposite side of the court, and they come toward him. He jabs with one hand extended to kind of let the ball handler know that like he's kind of in the area. And his man that he left, that should be an easy kick. And then Kawhi would have to close out, put a hand up. Instead, he puts one hand in the driving lane, and then just as the ball is being released to kick out to his man, his left hand comes up and reaches out into the passing lane, gets a deflection, run out, leak away. And I watched the replay of it, and I literally thought, I don't know there's another player in the NBA who's making that play. Not even Giannis with his reach is making that play, because it also involved not only like length, it involved like that quick cat-like reaction when the ball actually left the passer's hands. So I watched that play, and it just reminds you of what this guy's doing at that end of the floor. There's a couple points on Kawhi to pound this point home. First, I want to say, and I don't know this because I didn't look it up, and maybe you know it. Maybe you've already done this research. How many guys, JJ, have won their first MVP at 32 years old? Like, that doesn't really happen. It doesn't happen. Like,
I was having this conversation with my kids yesterday, actually, about this.
Did you happen to look that up? Because I'm
I didn't look it up, and it was a golden opportunity, but I was actually driving them. I was literally the driver. But it's interesting. They made the comment, how come Jason Tatum never wins MVP? And I said, well, part of it is, he's on the Celtics, and the perception is they've got all this stuff, and they've got all this talent, they're loaded, and the other part of it is like Jokic and Giannis and Joel, Shea, like they're in their prime as well with Tatum, right? And then my son said, will Steph win another MVP? And the comment I made was, I was like, Knox, I don't know how many guys have won MVP historically in their mid to late 30s. It's a great point, Tim. I do, some crack researcher, a listener, viewer, please let us know. I've got a tea time later, so I'm not going to.
Well, yeah, but I mean, and that's my point with it. Like most guys that are MVP caliber talents, if you're even in the discussion to ever at any point in your career, if you're ever in that discussion, normally you're going to get that by the time you're in your late 20s, right? At the latest, maybe mid to late 20s. That's usually when you get one. And then a lot of times there's like a window to get the award. And then if it's like, okay, we're kind of done with that, you don't win anymore. I mean, LeBron, I think, was a great example of that. Like he won 4 in a short period of time. And then it was kind of like, okay, even though every year you could have made an argument for him, it was almost like in people's minds, well, okay, he had his window of run of MVP and we moved on from that. And by 32, that was probably the case. Just look at the guys we're talking about. Like you don't usually, and that's why I've always said about Kawhi, I've always used that. You and I had this conversation on your pod, Old Man and Three one time. Remember about the deli and guys having that number at the deli, right? Waiting to get their order. I felt like Kawhi's had that number in his hand the whole time. And like, wouldn't it be like just if Kawhi Leonard finally ended up with one with what he has meant and done to the game and the way he's playing right now, man, is he making an argument? And look, if they keep winning at this rate, and they have to keep their foot on the gas, because at the end of the year, like these are important games because of seeding, and they do want to get the number 1 seed if they're going for it. And they just keep winning at this rate. And we don't expect his numbers to drop off at all. He has to garner a lot of attention, a lot of vote for that. And maybe here at 32 years old, with everything this guy's done in his career, he finally gets it. I mean, JJ, he's at 52, 45, and 90 splits, by the way, in what he's doing. And that's always been the case.
Season,
lowest margin of error of any player in history on his jump shot, because if the ball travels about 4 inches above the rim on his trajectory, it's right. Would you agree? It's like the lowest margin of error I've ever seen on a guy shooting a basketball. It's that precision was the word you use. And it's a perfect word. I've described him as robotic at times. It's so automatic. The way that he shoots the ball, like he's back at that level and he's having the team success. So the question is going to be ultimately for him. Do people hold it against him? And Tatum, I think, who doesn't even come up, it seems like, despite having the best record in the league, is it used against these guys ultimately that they've got too much help and too much talent around them? Is that what plays into it? Because if you just watch him every night, clearly he deserves to get a ton of attention, a ton of votes when the time comes.
2 things on that. I want to say Matthew Williams or one of his colleagues that sends our daily stat newsletter from ESPN. I want to say I read in one of those that Kawhi has the second lowest trajectory of any jump shot in the NBA. I want to say that's a factual stat.
Wait a second right now.
I want to say that.
If you're going to throw that out there, you better tell me who's number 1.
Oh man, Tim, I'm on my phone right now because my computer broke. Otherwise, I'd be looking this up
like,
right now.
How could it be flatter than Kawhi Leonard's jump shot?
Well, have you seen Caleb Martin shoot? Have you seen Caleb Martin shoot? The second thing, I'm just now, you've got my brain working here. Now that I'm thinking about it, so I think you'd have to go back a while, and please don't quote me on any of this, but I think you'd have to go back a while. So Dirk was probably past or late 20s, but maybe past 30 in 07. I know Nash was in his 30s when he won in 04, 05, and 05, 06. And then in the 90s, Malone and Jordan, Dream and David Robinson, maybe even Barkley. I don't know what their exact ages were, but the point is the league, it was a different time. Guys stayed 3-4 years, right? And so it was younger. It's younger now, where a guy like Giannis, he gets 3 or 4 years of experience, becomes an all-star, and he's still 22 years old with an insane sort of runway for his prime. So it's a great question. I would like to actually dive into this. Maybe we'll do this on a different pod. I want to talk about the Cavs.
It's hard. All right.
The Cavs are the hottest team in the NBA right now. They are all the way up to second place, 5 games back of the Celtics. But they have a 3-game cushion in the loss column on the third place Milwaukee Bucks and 4 up on the Knicks, who are in 4th place. They were 13-12. Felt like they were shot. They've been 22-4 since then. There was talk, even I remember this talk. It's like Mobley goes down, Darius Garland goes down. They were really struggling when they were at full strength, and they've just found it since December 15th. 22-4, the best win percentage in the NBA, number 3 offense, number 1 defense. Jared Allen playing at an all-star level, Donovan Mitchell playing at an MVP level. And the great news to me is since Mobley has come back, and there's been a couple games where he's been out, and since Garland has came back, Mobley in the 7 games he's played, they're 7-0. Garland in the 7 games he's played, they're 7-0. 2 questions on this. What to make of this recent stretch for the Cleveland Cavaliers, and how serious is the Donovan Mitchell MVP conversation?
It's picking up. I don't think it was something that was really, mentioned until now. You can't deny it anymore. He's going to be in the conversation because now we're talking about the Cavs a lot. I barely talked about the Cavs for a long time. They had injuries. There was just other better storylines that we were covering every day. Now the Cavs are part of my daily conversation about the NBA because of how they're playing. And so when you dive into it and you start to go look at them and what they're doing right now, for me, the first thing I do with this team, I focus on what's going on defensively with the Cavs, to put it in perspective of what they're doing right now in a league where this is so hard to accomplish. So the lowest 3 scoring teams in the league are right around 107, 108 points a game. And I know one of them's Charlotte. I think Portland's in there. San Antonio might be the other one. About 107, 108. That's the worst offenses in the NBA. Okay, so like on a nightly basis, really bad teams are getting to like 108 on average. The Cavaliers, reason I bring it up, the Cavaliers recently had a stretch where they were like 15-1 in a 16-game stretch. And 12 of the 15 wins, JJ, 12 of the 15, they held teams to 102 points or less. 12 times in 15 wins. So you right there, you look at it like, how hard that is to do in the modern NBA with the number of threes that are taken and just the pace of the game and the way that we look at the NBA now being so offense driven, to do that on a nightly basis, because what they have found now is this combination of these bigs and their disruption and Mobley's ability to jump out in the perimeter and guard wings. In fact, the other night they played Washington. Kuzma got hot in the first half, middle of the third quarter. He's still hot. They go, all right, Evan, you got Kuzma. Not as like a switch out on Kuzma, like run up the floor. You're guarding Kyle Kuzma now at the start of the possession for a 7-footer. And it totally changed that game. And Cavs have a great fourth quarter. They win the game. And tonight they didn't really play particularly well. So their defense is driving a lot of their team's success. So then you look at the other end of the floor and you forget sometimes, because they're so good defensively, Donovan Mitchell's been unbelievable. He led them in scoring, I think, 8 straight wins. He still is the differentiating factor for them offensively. Now, that's the best trio of guards offensively, I think, in the Eastern Conference, because you got to factor in Karis LeVert, who's a really good offensive player, can run ball screen, can ISO, can facilitate. To go with Darius Garland and Mitchell, that's about as good as you're going to get from guard play. And then they've got the 2 bigs who, Mobley's a pretty good offensive player, but then Allen's mainly a dive dunk guy, offensive rebound guy. And then you supplement it with all these shooters. They've got 4 to 5 high-level catch-and-shoot, 3-point shooting guys to space the floor. But none of it really works without that elite-level one-on-one breakdown ability of Donovan Mitchell. That if they don't have that, if he's just not quite as good at that, then I think the Cavs they're in more games where it's coming down the wire and they're trying to get to 102, 105. Mitchell separates that for them. So when you add in all this team success, how good they are defensively, I think they're now legitimately, they're going to be right there in a battle to potentially, win the conference. Like they're going to be in that mix of teams. Mitchell is the guy that separates them and gives them a chance to win games because of his elite offensive ability. So he is now, how I would describe it, climbing the rungs in the ladder, JJ. He's now his name has to come up now when we're talking about all these guys we're talking about that could get some MVP attention.
Yeah, he's played in 22 of those games since December 15th. They're 19-3 in those 22 games. He's at 29 points a game, 7 assists, 50% from the field, 37% from 3 on almost 10 attempts. That's just elite level scoring and playmaking. So it does start with him. And I mentioned this recently on one of our podcasts in talking about the Cavs. I think a big thing for me, because let me say this, big picture, right? When I think about the Cavs, when they are healthy, they have an identity. You brought up the defense. That is their identity. They've added the shooting, which was a huge crutch to me last year with Niang, Dean Wade, who's been great, Max Strus, of course. So they've added the shooting. They have the playmaking with Garland and Mitchell. They have the defensive size, which is really, I think, their number one piece of their identity. A big thing for me, if you're going to play the two bigs, when you get to the playoffs, you got to have some level of spacing. And we saw that creep up last year against the New York Knicks. Evan Mobley, in less than 25 minutes a game since he returned 7 games, 16 points a game, almost 10 rebounds a game. He's basically averaging a double-double in about 24.7 minutes since he returned. Here's the promising thing. He's taking almost 2 threes a game, and he's made over 54% of those. That, to me, if Evan Mobley in the playoff series is comfortable spacing and taking 2, 3, 4 threes in a per playoff game, that unlocks a new thing. And he's making them at 35+%. That unlocks a new thing because defensively, teams are going to have real issues with those two bigs. They're both of them are that good. I brought up the win share stuff earlier. You watch this team play. Jared Allen, I would not have predicted this when he was in Brooklyn. Jared Allen, out of that short roll and pick and roll, playing as a hub, making decisions. He's now making that like 13 foot shot, not just at the rim. Defensively, as an anchor, he's been as good as anyone in the NBA this season. Backline defense, drop coverage, all of that stuff, help the helper. He's just been phenomenal. So when I think about this team, I'm a little jaded, I think, by the New York Knicks series last year when I felt like they got physically punked. They got punked last year. Yeah. The Knicks punked them. And in some ways, like for Garland, for Mobley, like it was their first playoff series, right? You kind of give, not a pass, but you kind of just acknowledge that and you contextualize that. I think Boston's the best team in the East. I love the Knicks. I love what they've done. Cleveland's in the conversation to me. Those are the 3 teams right now that I'm really confident in. And I wouldn't have said that on December 14th or 15th. I wouldn't have said that about the Cleveland Cavaliers. Their recent play has been phenomenal. And not just that, offensively, I brought this up when I was talking about Dean Wade recently. Offensively, their ability to space now and put multiple like a lineup with multiple shooters, catch and shoot guys around their playmakers has just been a huge difference maker. It's been a huge difference maker.
Yeah, and even and I want to give him credit because of how well he's played. Sam Merrill, I'll throw him in there as well because he's blown me away. I should
mention him. He's had some huge games.
And he's coming in there. He's one role offensively, but my man, oh man, is he? He first time he touches it, I think every single time he checks the game, he shoots it, and no matter where it's from. And I love that they've given him that kind of freedom because it's like, this is what you're out here to do it, get one up, get a feel for the ball tonight, and then we'll roll from there. And he's just so consistent when he has any space at any time at all. So you got 4 guys we mentioned with the other 3 alongside what they have. One of the reasons I really like them, JJ, offensively, and for Mitchell particularly in this situation, when he was in Utah, pre-Mike Conley's arrival, you felt like at the end of the game in important moments, you didn't necessarily trust that he was going to get the shot he wanted because I felt like he was just so intent on going and he would end up taking maybe a step back 3 at an inopportune time with a guy draped on him early in the clock. And you're like, man, he just wants to like end this thing and come up with that big moment. When Conley came, it helped stabilize him because now you have a guy to like handle the ball, get it into a better position. So now Donovan can catch it in a better place after there's been some action on the other side. They swing it around to him. And now I just think he's better that way. And that's exactly what Darius Garland does for him. So their chemistry continues to evolve. But I just look at it like this. Check boxes. What you need to contend. You need elite level breakdown player. They've got it. They've got a couple guys like that. You need size that you can defend the rim and you can control the glass. check. And then you've got to have shooting in this league, check. So the Cavs check all that stuff. And that's why for me now, I'm watching, 2-3 Cavs games a week. And I wasn't watching them the first 25, 30 games. You couldn't. There was too much other stuff going on. Now they're on this roll. You go, okay, they're in the conversation. You better be watching the Cavs because they're impressive.
Totally agree. All right. Our third thing on this week's episode is Brandon Miller. Let's be honest. This entire Brandon Miller segment, I just want to have a caveat to this in that the Charlotte Hornets stink. They are not a good basketball team. However, we've spent a lot of time on Chet. We've spent a lot of time on Wemby. We've spent some time on Jaime Jaquez Jr. I believe, early in the season, especially, we talked about Thompson from Detroit. We need to spend some time on Brandon Miller right now because he's playing unbelievable. I have a ton of stuff here. I've watched a ton of film recently. So I have a lot of thoughts on this. I want to start with you though. What are your observations, takeaways right now from Brandon Miller's play as of late?
Yeah, it's been tremendous, and you're right. There's no real reason to watch Charlotte. He's the reason that you want to watch Charlotte play.
He is the reason. Thank you.
Yes, he's the reason. There's no other reason, right? So, and here's what I'm seeing from him, and I really liked him coming out. And early on, there were times he looked a little bit like physically overmatched, just from a sheer strength standpoint, and getting to where he wanted to go and maintaining balance on drives and it was part of it, his physical build. Part of it was also just being young and new to him and coming into the league, and it's just a lot for guys. So and I knew he was a good pick, but I just didn't know ultimately how great. What is his ceiling? Here's what I'm seeing out of him lately. Now, I thought that, and I do like sometimes comparisons to current players when guys are coming out. I think for point of reference for people that aren't aware of who the guy is, they haven't seen him that much. If you can give a little bit of a description of he's kind of like this at the ultimate ceiling. If everything pops, he could be this. This reminds me of, and I said Paul George at the time coming out. Now, Paul George has a much more accomplished handle, much more a polished handle, right? And that definitely is the main difference between the two of them. Where I saw some of the similarities in Brandon Miller coming out, I'm really starting to see them now. And then there's another guy I'm also starting to see a comparison to it, particularly the way he operates on ball screen, is Jason Tatum. Now, Tatum also, he wasn't like this when he came in the league, but Tatum's handle now is elite level where he can go back and forth multiple times with the ball and get you off balance and then pick a direction and go, or go, counter, different move, go the other direction. That's not quite Brandon Miller yet with the handle. Let's be honest about it. But where he is excelling, his triple threat pivot work, it reminds me so much of Tatum, where the ball screen comes and he's not going to already be pounding it. He's holding the ball on his hip as the ball screen comes. And now he's going into his jab step stuff, JJ. And here I am sitting in the chair doing this in my office. This is how into this stuff I get. But he's so good with the ball, with his foot, with his pivot, with his rocker stuff to get you sort of off balance and make the defender of the screener not know where he's going. And then he's so good at then that first step, either direction, going and exploding. So his ability now to operate out of that, and he's averaging 25 points a game this month. This is where he's going with his scoring right now. And the main two areas of improvement are his ability to create off the ball screen to a pull-up three or to get into the lane. He's starting to develop these one-footed floaters, 8, 10, 12 feet. These running shots are going in at a high rate. And then the other incremental improvement he's shown here lately is, and I saw a number on him earlier in the year, he was at 54% finishing inside of 5 feet on all field goal attempts, which is a low number for a wing with size. By the time you get in there, they should be shooting a higher rate than that. That's up now in the low 60s over the last whatever many games, 15 games. So that's a pretty significant jump, 54 to 62% in that period of time. So that tells you also he's more comfortable now of how to manipulate the ball around guys, to absorb contact a little bit better, make the shot, not rush it as he gets in there. So the patience and how he's seeing the floor at the NBA level, it's all coming together for him. But he's a very talented offensive player. And the best news about it for Charlotte, you didn't have much of a choice at 2 because you knew who was going to 1. And for this guy to be basically fall in your lap as the second pick, they made the right pick. This guy is legit, man. And the way he has grown throughout the year has been the most impressive thing because it's been very rapid. And he's going to finish this thing, man, over these last 25, 30 games on it, just a heater. He's going to average probably 23 to 25 points a game over a 30-game stretch to finish the year. It's an enormous sample size, even on a bad team.
You brought up February. Since January 18th, 14 games, 49% from the field, 39% from 3 on almost 8 attempts, 22 a game, 5 rebounds, 2.5 assists. I'm going to talk about the defensive stuff in a second. In that 14-game stretch, he's got 10 20-point games. You used the Tatum comp, which I like. It is funny that Paul George, right? He said that Paul George, coming out, he said, Paul George is my GOAT. And there's certainly some Paul George comp there. The other guy that I, in watching film, the other guy I see a little bit of is Brandon Ingram. And the reason I say Brandon Ingram is because out of that pick and roll, his ability with his positional size to just get to the mid-range, going to his right, going to his left, it doesn't really matter, and just kind of shooting over defenders. And he's got a little bit of that, especially going right. He's got a little bit of that Brandon Ingram tilt. Now he's got a lower release point. Yeah, exactly. He's got a lower release point than BI, but he has that tilt where he can kind of fall away going to his right and just shoot right over the top. The pick and roll stuff lately has been incredible. I talked about the mid-range. You brought up the finishing, and I'm glad you did because he's had a number of drives. I mean, he had 2 against Anthony Davis in that Lakers game where he's finishing on the other side of the rim with his offhand. So you have that stuff. Shooting threes off the dribble is, to me, the thing that unlocks every elite offensive player on the perimeter. That is the thing. And he had a step back 3 against the Lakers that just totally shook Austin Reeves that he made. There was a play from the Lakers game that it was my favorite play I've seen. So he's in a strong side pick and roll in the corner, and they run the pick and roll towards the middle. He tags. Austin Reeves catches the ball in the wing. He closes out. They go to try to post. Austin Reeves, passes him, tries to pass Anthony Davis the ball. He steals the ball and he goes down and bangs on somebody. He goes down and dunks. And it's like, if we're gonna comp Paul George, if we're gonna comp Tatum, right, you've got to be disruptive on the defensive end. And that to me is, I've seen a lot of that recently. He had a chase down block that was just fucking insane. And it's the reason I want to bring up this. So he gets the chase down block, goes down, makes a spot up 3. They're running a ton of stuff for him right now for catch and shoot threes. So they'll come out of a timeout and they'll run a pick the picker for him to get a catch and shoot 3. His versatility offensively as a rookie is super impressive. Here's the most important thing to me with Brandon Miller, and this is why I brought up the chase down block. There was a viral thing the other day where he scores a layup. The other team takes the ball out. They go down. They score a layup. He's the first guy back. He started at the baseline. He's screaming at his teammates, get the fuck back. Get the fuck back. I talked to some people in the Hornets organization. It's like, I can see this guy. I can see what I see on the court. What's this guy like? Here's some words thrown around. Smart, great IQ, competitor, coachable, great teammate, detail-oriented as a rookie. Come on, man. Buy this guy's stock. Buy this guy's stock. Because physically he has it. Skill-wise he has it. You have 2 of the 3 boxes checked. If you've got it up here, if you've got it in the mindset, oh my gosh, this guy's going to be an all-star, all-NBA type player for years.
Agreed.
That's how good Brandon Miller can be.
I totally agree. Seems like we're in lockstep with what we're seeing out of him. And it's now he's a guy that, like I said, he's the only reason to watch. So I'm going to watch the condensed version and just watch his possessions. There's no other reason to watch Charlotte. I got a
Shout out
question for you.
Second Spectrum. It's the best thing ever.
So let's finish this up on Brandon Miller with this then, because I think this is important. You got Victor, you got Chet, Brandon Miller. You got three guys. I'm going to ask you, do you consider the Rookie of the Year award to be mostly just flat out stat based and what the guy's ultimate, based on what you're seeing, what this guy's ultimate ceiling really is? And meaning who's really going to be the overall better player when this is all said and done, and they're putting up numbers. How much do you play into a competitive environment? Because Chet Holmgren's on a team that's going to win more games than San Antonio and Charlotte combined. And he's been starting from the beginning. He also, and Victor too, all three of these guys, which is great, you said it, they're all disruptive defensively, right? They're all major impact players on that end of the floor. But Chet is on a team that's been near the top of the West the entire season and will probably stay there. And so his numbers might not be as good by the time, certainly not as good as Victor's right now, but close. I mean, and his shooting splits are incredible, Holmgren's. And Brandon Miller's numbers are continuing to climb up. So by the time this is all said and done, he's probably going to end up with better, just raw scoring numbers than Chet. How much do you factor in when you're looking at this award? Because it's mostly been Victor and Chet. That's all we've talked about for Rookie of the Year. Obviously, Brandon Miller needs some consideration here. I'm just curious, you personally, how do you factor in the weight of the competitive environment that they're in every night and their role in that team? Guys starting averaging 34, 35 minutes a game on a team that good in Oklahoma City. How much weight does that carry relative to what Wembanyama and Miller are getting, which is every night is it's not about winning at all. It's about their development only, really. That's what the season is left on. So I'm just curious to get your thoughts on that, because I think Miller's now in the conversation, but ultimately, how do you parse those choices?
Yeah, we spent some time on this with the Dunker Spot guys maybe 6 weeks ago. And look, I said at the time, I thought Chet Holmgren was the MVP. And maybe I was a little flippant about Victor Wembanyama's Rookie of the Year chances. And for Spurs fans, I apologize for that. I think those two guys are neck and neck right now, I guess. Look, to your point about factoring in, Tim, Chet Holmgren right now is an anomaly. He was the second pick, didn't play, and now is on a West leading team that, because they've developed their guys internally, they drafted really well, late in the lottery to get Jalen Williams, who's a fucking star, had a monster game last night. So I think it's weird, because normally you don't factor in competitive environment with rookies, right? Because none of them have the counting. Normally a rookie that goes to a competitive environment is the 24th pick, the 28th pick, whatever it may be. He's the sixth guy, the seventh guy, the eighth team. Right, exactly. And maybe he has, 9 points, 5 assists, whatever. So you're not really factoring in that person because the counting stats just aren't there, right?
Yeah.
Even going back to last year, Jalen Williams had an insane stretch post All-Star break towards the end of the regular season. I said, he deserves some consideration. I'm not saying he's the Rookie of the Year. I ultimately voted for Paolo Banchero because of the role that he had to have as a rookie, being, along with Franz Wagner, one of the two primary guys in terms of shot creation and the offense running through them. As it relates to this year, I think you're right. I think there's it's not out of the realm of possibility that Brandon Miller continues this stretch of games and continues the stretch of play and ends up with maybe better, scoring numbers than Chet, whatever it may be. If I had to say right now, I think what Vic has done since he moved to center and since they started playing him more with Trey Jones, but since he moved to center, most importantly, and they got Zach Collins coming off the bench and he's got more space, the production, efficient, all that stuff's gone up. You also have to factor in, I think, with Vic to some degree, the wow factor. Yeah. Just the fucking plays he's made. Yeah. You're like, all right, I would give probably the slight edge to Vic right now. Now, we have 30 fucking games. I know I'm going to do the same thing I did last year. What is the last day of the regular season? April 10th? Okay. My vote's due April 11th. Whatever the last day is. I'm voting on the last day. I'm factoring it all for all this stuff. There's too much on the line. Yeah. And I think it's important as we go down the stretch to have these check-ins with Rookie of the Year, Sixth Man of the Year, MVP, whatever. I like doing this later in the season There's so much just random noise 5, 10, 20 games into the season. To me, it's not worth doing it. But right now, these three guys have been the three best rookies. Jaquez Jr., who I said was the third best rookie for a couple times early in the season, had the groin injury, hasn't been the same player since he got back. He's obviously in the top 5 of the rookies as well. But these three guys, I think, have really separated themselves in this rookie class. And last thing I want to say, Tim, I was just thinking about this as we were talking about Brandon Miller. Do you remember at the draft or around the draft when a very prominent reporter who has a show with a sports book tweeted out that the Charlotte Hornets were giving consideration to Scoot Henderson? Here's the thing. Yeah. Charlotte was always going to take Brandon Miller. Yeah. Brandon Miller was their guy. He was their guy. They were always going to take him. Just interesting how that stuff plays out. It's interesting.
Well, and look, I think the purpose of what we did today is great because the three players we focused on and a couple of teams that we focused on in this session were all not discussed much the first half of the season. Clippers, Cavs, specifically Kawhi, Donovan Mitchell, and now Brandon Miller, where this was like two guys is all we talked about, all we mentioned all year for this rookie stuff. Now he deserves to get the love he's getting because of the way he's playing. If you're not watching him, there's no reason to watch Charlotte. Just might want to, pull up a highlight video. You could probably find a 9-minute highlight clip of Brandon Miller online. Just take a look at him if you're a hoop junkie and you haven't watched Charlotte, and look at this guy's evolution as a player from day one and what he looked like, that first month in the league to what he looks like now. Because this looks like a super accomplished, elite level wing in the making. Like that's what he looks like. And you need those guys to have a chance to contend in this league. And Brandon Miller looks like he's got a chance to get there based on what he is doing right now offensively and how comfortable he's getting with what his ceiling is every night.
Totally agree with you. All right, Tim, always fun catching up.
Yeah, man.
We'll see you soon. This has been fun. Appreciate you.
Got it. Yep.